Our next topic is the momentum behind banning natural gas in new developments. Now, I have the General Manager of Technical Operations of IAPMO to come and join. Is that how you say it? IAPMO.
I go with I.
What are you saying?
Go with IAPMO.
IAPMO, okay.
It's a mouthful.
I know. Well, it could be anything, really. Anyway, you didn't hear what I first thought it was. Now, let me tell you a little bit about this gentleman standing beside me here. Graham has a background in mechanical engineering and has a wealth of experience in R&D management and various engineering capacities. Graham now leads a dedicated team focused on spearheading the transition to lead-free plumbing future and driving the evolution of energy standards within the Australian appliance market. So Graham Clark is our next speaker. Would you please give him a nice warm welcome? Thanks, Graham.
Thank you. Yes, I'm not sure if a lot of you know who we are. It is a big acronym, and the industry I work in, which is certification and testing, there is acronyms everywhere. It's a mess. We're the International Association of Plumbing and Mechanical Officials. Some days I forget it myself. Started in the US as a group of plumbing inspectors who got together to make a uniform code in America to simplify and streamline the regulatory space in plumbing. So our roots are in plumbing. Our operation in Melbourne is based around certification of plumbing products. So we do the watermark certification and we do gas mark certification. So gas compliance mark testing and certification in Melbourne. Today, I'll be providing a bit of an overview on where we see what particular jurisdictions are doing with their gas policies and how that's affecting the people we deal with, so appliance manufacturers and end users. So I guess we kind of fit in the middle of Jared's team, supplying the gas and getting the gas in the network. Paul and his team would be seeing it in the field along with you guys, and we're kind of in the middle testing product and certifying product. Some of our clients might say we're a bit painful, so I apologise for that. Where's my clicker at here? And I must apologise, I assume a lot of you are from up here, so as a Mexican I have somewhat focused on the situation in Victoria. I try to touch on other regions in the country, but yeah, I apologise in defence. So this is a topic that is highly emotive. It's always in the news. Everyone's got their patch to protect. Everyone thinks the other side has a sort of ulterior motive sometimes. On one side, you've got a legacy industry, which I would consider ourselves a part of. We've been doing this for a long time. Gas has been a big part of this country's development. And I guess on the gas side, you would suggest that there's pleas for a calm and steady transition to a renewable future. And it's an industry that we're often portrayed as, big, the gas industry, you'll hear people say. And they're trying to use that with negative connotations to suggest that, we're all associated with massive multi-billion-dollar corporates and all we're in it for is profit. What opponents of the gas industry often forget is that it's mostly made up of small sole traders, small plumbing businesses, small businesses like ours, all the associated ancillary people in that. Also manufacturers, we do a stack of manufacturing of gas appliances in this country still for the time being. So people forget that. It's easy to portray us as a big polluting industry, photos of the stacks and all that kind of jazz. And I think we really need to remember that it's made up with a lot of small people at the bottom. And on the other side of the coin, we have, it's quite a relatively, I wouldn't say new, but in the scheme of things, new, very passionate sector, pushing electrification. They would say altruistic means, which most of the time is probably true. And they've got a big groundswell of support from community as well. For people who don't see what goes on in the background, for them that's something they latch onto. And they're very effective. So I'll just run through a few of the states. It's mostly eastern seaboard. I must apologise to South Australia because in the last week or so there's been some huge announcements out there, and I had prepared this before all that had happened, so apologies to the gentleman I met from South Australia before. And first I'll start off with the timeline of sort of Victoria. Obviously I know this region better than anywhere else, but I just wanted to map out sort of how we got to the ban that happened last year. So, what's that, sorry?
Don't be government.
I'm going to keep splinters in my bum and stay on the fence. So 2020, gas exploration was reopened. And obviously they saw the shortfalls that Jared was talking about earlier and said, gee, we've got to start making some more gas. And prior to that, in around that time as well, they were still incentivising gas appliance installations. So you could still get rebates through the government system for replacing an electric hot water system, for example. 2021, there was murmurs of report into the Commission of gas connections in homes. So there was studies happening in and around that, not widely known or publicised, but that started happening. May 2022, there was a Vic Parliament inquiry into the recommendation to ban new gas connections. So this was all sort of murmuring in the background happening, but not a big news item. And then November 2022, we had a state election, and it wasn't mentioned up to that point or around that point. Sorry guys, is that better? So yeah, there's movement happening. November 2022, it all sort of comes to a grinding halt. And then July 2023, elections won, we're on the way, and we're banning gas connections from the 1st of January this year. That caught a lot of people on the hop. Industry associations that we're a part of, for gas appliance manufacturers, for plumbing products, for master plumbers, for instance, we deal with those guys a lot, were really caught off guard by this, and the consultation was lacking. It was publicly known that this was happening, but to make such a big decision without consultation was a big kick in the pants to everybody. And at the same time as announcing that, there was a RIS announced about looking into how to ban gas connections to existing dwellings. So the justification for the ban was saving people money on their bills. So $1,000 per year is the figure that's bandied about in government literature. Rebate schemes would be expanded for putting in electric appliances such as heat pumps and air conditioners and whatnot, split systems. And also $10 million in electrification grants were announced, $3 million for training for plumbers and apprentices to help with the transition, and $1 million in grants to assist the construction industry with the transition. So you can see by the split of money where the focus is for the Vic government. I'll just pop some links in there. So then we moved to Queensland, and it was pretty soon after that the Queensland Energy Minister said that they were not going down that path. Now, to provide some context there, it might be easier for the Queensland government to make that decision because the amount of gas connections in Queensland is obviously a lot less than what we've got down in Victoria. But in any case, Queensland heavily focused on hydrogen, talking about renewable gas, really talking about utilising the asset that a state has and not just cutting it off at the knees. So there's the number there, 210 gas connections in Vic, 21,000 in, no, that's not right. Jared will fix me up there, but you can see massive change in the amount of connections between Vic and Queensland. Then we had New South Wales ruling it out as well. And that was very soon after. But we then had Since that time, local governments putting in their own planning regulations that would not allow the addition of gas connections, or even if you were planning a renovation, you couldn't put a gas cooktop in and whatnot. So that's one way that other jurisdictions are handling that. And I think New South Wales has other issues with their electricity network and generation, and trying to get all that sorted without worrying about taking an energy out of the mix. There was also a study last week that showed their average time to approve a renewables project in New South Wales was something like 750 days. So that's just to get the project approved. So they've got bigger issues in trying to decarbonise their energy system. In December 2023, they passed the Climate Change Act. There's zero mentions of natural gas within the Act itself. I'm sure there's other ancillary policies, but within the Act, there's nothing about removing gas connections or changing their gas position in that Act. So here's just some justifications there. And again, New South Wales has a lot less, I wouldn't say a lot less, but less gas connections than Victoria, as we all know. And again, I apologise, South Australia heavily committed to the gas network and hopefully using that into the future. So, I mean, bans are one way that states, bans or not, I should say, are handling the move away from natural gas. And we see it with our clients, the number of new projects and people deciding to maintain certification of appliances is dropping off because they're just saying that the market demand is dropping off. So the bans are, one mechanism. The other possible effect is the new 7-star requirements. So the NCC 2022 has the 7-star requirements, as I'm sure you all heard. And within those requirements, it is quite difficult to get your 7-star rating if you're using a gas appliance. Within the software, so there's a software package that you can do those assessments. You can tune it for efficiency of appliance. So obviously a 6-star continuous flow would get a better rating than a 4-star storage. But if you're using the other mechanism that's a calculation sheet, it doesn't factor that in. If you want to use a gas water heater, you pretty much have to have solar PV to balance out that gas water heater. So if you're using that mechanism for 7-star, you pretty much can't use gas unless you have solar PV. Another factor is obviously the cost of gas. And Jared, went through this as well and would have way more knowledge and data on this than I do. But in my sort of looking into this, you can see our local price, the top chart there, and that's all relative to CPI. It's got electricity as well, has spiked. So people are just making the decision, I can't afford 2 bills, especially if one is increasing more than the other. I'm just going to centralise to one energy source for my household. And what else have I got there? And also it's tied in the bottom is a global sort of indicator. You can see that our local price is spiking with the global price. And I mean, it's frustrating that we've got diminishing gas supply, but we're selling it to the rest of the world the same price we're selling it to our local citizens. So that's one area where regulation may help households, but I can't see that happening. And this is kind of speculation on my part, but I think we've had inactivity at the federal level on energy and electricity and whatnot for 10 to 15 years. We all know the runaround that the federal governments have had with multiple prime ministers and shifting one in, one out. They believe this in climate change, they don't. They want this type of energy. It's been a shambles, and that's for both parties, so everyone can get a clip there. But I think local governments, state governments, householders, people who want to do something about the climate are saying, all right, we're going to do our own thing. So you've got suburbs deciding to band together and electrify and move away from gas. You've got industry bodies getting together, making associations. You've got countless numbers of renewable energy advisors sort of pushing into this area. So there's like a organic sort of movement to circumvent government policy and just do it themselves. So that's something else I just see as happening as well. I've even attended roadmap sessions on appliance certification and whatnot. You've got general members of the public who don't have a background in plumbing or engineering or appliances, or they're just homeowners who are interested in energy and the climate, and they're jumping on these roadmap meetings for standards and whatnot and giving their 2 cents and pushing their ideas on electrification and whatnot. So people are passionate, I guess is what I'm getting at. And what are the downsides, I guess? A lot of you in the room would see it. A lot of you in the room would understand it. At the moment, it's not an emissions reduction. And I think no one shies away from that, but it's not readily broadcast that it's not an emissions reduction. This is just a chart I pulled from the NEM last week, and it's the energy mix. So we're looking at still a big chunk, the black and brown, are coal. So that's where our power is coming from. So for domestic homes, that's where most of their power is coming from, unless they have rooftop PV. And that's just a chart of a longer term trend from the NEM data as well. This is all available on the IAPMO site. It's quite handy, quite interesting for a nerd like me anyway. You can see the trend is obviously heading down for coal, and the others are starting to pick up, but it's been slow. It's getting faster, but it's been slow. So we're saying that gas is no good because of emissions, let's remove it, but what we're going to is still a high emissions energy source. And I think everyone recognises that. I'm not breaking new ground there, obviously. And again, sorry to any WA attendees, that data is not included in there. But I think we all acknowledge that it will be in the future. Renewables uptake, renewable gases, the market will shift to that, but how long will it take? And this was just released from the Clean Energy Regulator last week. So it's their reporting of annual emissions. And you can see the purple line there is the Scope 1 emissions. They are on the way down. So it's happening. Now, the other thing that isn't talked about as much is there's a whole range of other impacts of banning gas. Gas connections, I should say, for mainly domestic situations. Manufacturing. We have some people next door exhibiting who manufacture locally, manufacture gas appliances locally. It's one of the last things we make. We're going to cut another industry off, and we're going to lose skilled trades. It's already hard to find people like welders, fitters and turners, maintenance people for manufacturing. There's a flow-on effect to that for any other manufacturing industries that are still left in the country. Regulation and certification, that's the space we work in, is not keeping up. You've got standards that some products are assessed to are 20, 30 years old. So it's not keeping up with how fast everything's moving, so that's an issue. And that's on electrical side products that we see. So that has implications for public safety, obviously, which Paul would be interested in. There's an environmental cost. So there's a sunk cost when you pull out a perfectly functioning gas appliance that's only been in, I think they've now put a 3-year limit. It can't be any younger than 3 years. A 4-year-old appliance could last to 10, could last to 15, who knows? You're pulling it out and chucking it on the nature strip. What's the sunk CO2 in that appliance? It's also a haves versus have-nots. So you see a lot of case studies, someone on the news or someone in the papers, I've electrified my house, I'm saving $2,000 a year. In there somewhere, it'll say it cost them $25,000, it cost them $15,000, and that's great for them. But if you're renting, you can't do that for starters. If you're just paying your mortgage, you can't sink 25 grand into upgrading your house to have cheaper power bills. So I think there's a bit of that going on. It all sounds great, and it is great for those people that can afford it and stick with the payback period, but we need to remember that a lot of society cannot cope with that additional cost. And I mean, here I have to acknowledge that, hindsight is awesome. We know everything about what happened before now, and we know how we should have done it better. So, I mean, I don't envy governments in having to make these decisions, I should say. So, can we hang on to gas a little longer to make the transition more smooth? Can we hang on until the cost of hydrogen becomes viable for homeowners and for appliances? Could we restrict the use of our gas to locally, or help our own citizens with the price of gas? We need a stopgap. I mean, I think I've covered that enough. Could we use gas for electricity generators? We saw in Victoria, we had a huge storm a few weeks ago. One of the coal plants dropped off. Gas filled that gap with a gas turbine. It's slightly more efficient. It's still not great for emissions, but could we use that to help us getting that brown and black line on that chart I showed before, getting that down? Consult industry. So I've been involved in a few roadmap meetings about schemes that have already been introduced for 2 or 3 years. It's too late then. Don't consult us after the horse has bolted. Talk to us beforehand. And when I say us, I mean everyone. Consider real-world implications. So think of the people at the bottom end of the scale. How is that going to affect them? Think of wider reaches of industry. And the last one is a complete pipe dream, but have a consistent approach across all jurisdictions. We're seeing with heat pumps and the rebate systems, there's, I think, 3, 4, maybe 5 systems now. It's a shambles. Everyone try and work together. And I get different persuasions of government and different pulling forces, but it's really hard for people like yourselves, manufacturers, to navigate that sort of thing. All right, and I guess it's going to be interesting to see where it all goes from here. We're advocates for moving to a renewable future, reducing emissions, all of that sort of thing, but we need to acknowledge that we're leaving a big section of society behind, and we're also having a big effect on industries within this country. I mean, it's very cliche, but everyone just needs to work together to make sure that what they are implementing is effective and logical. And I'll just go back to that first point I made. I think it needs to be acknowledged that the gas industry is a wide range of people. It's small business, it's some big business, but it's a big chunk of this country, and it's something that's got us to a great position. And that's all I've got, so I'm not even going to get dripped on or flushed. But yeah, I'd like to thank the Master Plumbers for having us here today, and everyone for listening. I hope you learnt maybe at least one thing out of it. Yeah, cool. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Graham. Would you like us to give you a flush? Just so you don't feel it. Okay, could I have one flush, please? Perfect. Now, don't go anywhere because you've got to...